everyone, I'm Ellie. Join me in making this needle case cover. You may have several designs that you want to do and several different patterns. This is a nice, simple way to do a cover to make your needle case stand out a little bit more, make it a little bit more blingy. So we're going to begin our needle cover, and we are going to be doing a lot of 2-drop peyote fun. So if you're not sure what peyote is, you may want to watch a tutorial first on peyote before learning and going into this 2-drop. It's very simple though. You're going to have 0.006 wildfire beading thread and a size 10 needle. That's going to fit through the crystals fine as we add them in, and you can change up your supplies too and kind of make it your own. You can do it all with seed beads, but you're going to begin with 36 11-0 Miyuki seed beads. If you have Toho, you may be able to go with 34, but you want to make sure whatever number you're doing and whatever bead you're starting with, it wants to be an even count. So I have 36 beads on my needle and thread, and I'm going to sew back through to make a loop, sewing back through an even amount of them. So I have 4 and 8, it looks like I got back through. You're going to hold those 8 seed beads and kind of pull this into a circle. That's going to sit fairly well onto this needle case cover. It'll seem a little big at first, but by the time we go in and add the crystals, it'll actually start to get a little bit tugger and snugger on the piece. What we're going to do, like I said, is 2-drop peyote. Unlike regular peyote where you do 1 bead at a time, 2-drop you do 2 beads at a time. So moving the needle case out of the cover here, you're going to pick up 2 of your seed beads, and I'm using the Crystal Lab Full. I'm going to skip over the next 2 seed beads and sew through the next 2 in line. The reason I'm not tying a circle is because I don't want a knot in the project. You will be able to see it if you are creating a knot, and we're going to come back to this starting spot in order to kind of close in our bottom. Again, 2 more seed beads go in, skip the next 2, and then sew through the next 2. Why, you might ask, am I doing 2-drop? I'm doing 2-drop because my crystals sit perfectly in the space of 2 11-0s. Also, it's faster. So the peyote cover case is going to take a little bit of time because it is a lot of beads and a pretty big area of surface to cover a good 3 inches. So going around here, you're continuing to add. You'll almost look like you're having little flowers or little droplets along the piece, remembering that you're skipping 2, adding 2, and then sewing through the next 2 in line. As you pull your needle around, we're going to go through the whole thing. Right now I'm off my needle case. If you want to, you can create the whole thing off the case, but I actually prefer to do it on the case so I can get kind of a nice tight snug after I get a couple rows established. Some people may want to actually put it on right away and kind of build with the peyote case on right away. A little hint and a trick, if you want to, actually build towards the bottom, and I'll show you what I mean, that you can take the case cover off and before we kind of set it on, and you can make it easier to hold by holding it backwards. So I'm going in here, finishing up, and you're going to end up adding in a whole nother set of beads here, all along the rows, and finishing up. So as you come back to the start, you're going to have 2 more beads that go on. Go through those last 2 beads right before kind of your thread and needle were coming out. And then what you're going to do is do a step up. So this happens anytime you're doing tubular peyote. I started doing this piece actually thinking that I was going to use delicas and then I was going to make a long strip and then round it out. Quickly realized, 1, that's not the fastest way. 2, delicas made it a little bit less accessible for a lot of people. And 3, excuse me, when I seamed them together, it kind of was really rigid. So now we're doing this step up where we're doing that tubular peyote and we're going through the first 2 beads that were added in this row that we went around in. From here, you kind of have a line established now where you're going to add those 2 beads. If you want to, again, go ahead and stick it on your needle cover. And like I said, we're eventually going to be basically building towards the top. What I'm going to do is actually have my thread and needle so it's coming out the bottom. The reason I'm holding that towards the bottom is because it makes it less of an area that I have to sew around, basically. So now once I'm on my needle case, I'm going to sew around and fill in that empty void of 2 seed beads with 2 more seed beads. I'm going to add 2 beads and then sew into the 2 from the row I just added. Again, you can do this off the case if you want, but you see how you just have a slight area, you're gonna get less tangles if you kind of do it here. 2 more beads go on, sew through the next 2 that you just added. I'm gonna continue doing this the whole way around, and then we'll have fun going in and actually adding in some of our crystals. When you're going around here, you'll notice that this peyote almost looks like it starts to kind of zigzag and snake back and forth. I'll pull that knot out here. And that zigzagging and snaking back and forth look is the effect of that 2-drop peyote. And I'll take this here and untwist my thread. When you think you have a knot like this, and I'll keep this portion in this video clip because you usually don't really have a knot, it's just kind of twisted together. So just kind of back up a little bit, pull it back out, and you can usually solve your issue. So I'm gonna put it back onto my needle case so that way I get a nice tight snug pull as I'm working around, and continue on adding in my 2 beads, again getting that kind of snaking effect. Once we get to the end of adding these 2 beads, then I'll show you how we're gonna get ready and put on our crystals. So once you finish going around and adding in your seed beads, you're going to pull, and I stepped up. So I actually went through 4 beads right away. And you'll know that you're coming out of kind of the seed beads that stick up a little bit. Here we're gonna have fun now and get in and add our crystals. The crystals are gonna take the place of 2 11-0 seed beads. So I'm gonna add a crystal, and then I'm gonna sew through the next 2 11-0 seed beads in that last line of my peyote stitch. Give a nice little tight pull, and this will actually tighten up your cover. Add 2 more beads, or I'm sorry, add 1 more crystal and sew through the next 2 beads that stick out. Give a nice tight pull, add 2 more beads, and keep going. So you're gonna go around in a circle, and you're gonna end up, because we started with 36, you're gonna end up adding 9 crystals in place. So I'm gonna add my crystal and sew through. And as you add around, you can kind of just push that around if you need to. Give a nice tight pull to tighten up that case. Once you're done going through and adding this row of crystals, we're gonna go back to adding a seed bead row. I wanna make sure that each of my crystals, prior to kind of getting added, that there's 3 rows of seed beads that are used and utilized to separate out the crystals. Otherwise, it's gonna be really blingy and you're gonna use a ton of crystals. We're already gonna use a lot of crystals as we create and build and kind of add this on. But as we create and make a longer piece here along the edges, I'm going to separate it out so we get kind of a nice, almost zigzagging effect of the crystals, almost like a crystal lace look. And I'm going around here, and I have 2 more to add, I think. Yep, 1. And after you add in your last of your crystals, again, give it a little tight, nice tight pull. Adding in then, and here I'm going through my last 2 11-0 seed beads. And as I go through those last 2 11-0 seed beads, then I'm gonna get ready for my step up. My step up is going to be through the crystals. Now it's super simple going around this row. You're gonna add in 2 seed beads, because we're always using 2 at a time. So the Crystal Lab Pool is always getting pulled out 2 at a time. Every time, the whole kind of length of this casing. 2 seed beads get added through the crystal. 2 seed beads get added and through the crystal. So this continues the whole way around, and then as we get ready for our next row, we're gonna add in our next row of our crystals. Because eventually what we're gonna establish is that we want 3 lines of seed beads between each. And I'll go and build a little bit more too, so you can see more of that pattern if you wanna skip ahead and watch ahead before adding some of these crystals. You'll be able to see and establish that pattern a little bit better. So going through here, adding in 2 crystals or 2 seed beads the whole way around, you're sewing through your crystals because they are the piece of peyote. So basically the crystals get added 1 drop or regular peyote, but you're always sewing through the seed beads 2 at a time and adding 2 at a time. So we're gonna build this needle case kind of from the top down. And as we build from the top down, then that'll allow us to go in and close off the bottom when we get there. We'll go back in and cinch up the top a little bit too, but there's also going to be the debate whether or not you need to glue this on. It's going to become pretty tight on it, so you're not going to need glue, but you can glue if you want. I'm going to use a little glue towards the top when I get to the lid portion. From here, I'm finishing out going through my last of my crystals. And as you go through the last of those crystals, again, a little nice and tight tug. Make sure you're not pulling where your thread is going through your needle, because you don't want that to fray. So make sure you're pulling kind of on your thread. You're going to step up through those first 2 seed beads that you added. And now we're going to add a row of seed beads, just seed beads, because we're going right above the crystal one. So you're going to add 2 seed beads and go through the 2 11-0 seed beads that you just added the last row that sit right beside and between those crystals. Go ahead around adding that in. And then as you finish that row, I'll show you how we're going to add our next row of our crystals on. So as you're coming back around and adding in your last 2 beads, you're going to finish off going back through the first 2 seed beads that you were coming out of and step up. So here's going to establish my pattern where I'm saying that I have 3 rows of seed beads and then I start a crystal. So I have my 3 rows of 2 seed beads, and now I know it's time for a crystal. Again, if you want to skip ahead, you'll be able to see that pattern a little bit better, or back to kind of the cover image that you'll be able to see it. But this time around, I'm going to go around and add in my crystals. Next go around is going to be a row of seed beads that will get it in. We have a couple rows of seed beads, again, until we get to a point that I have 3 rows of 2 seed beads right above that last glass, or that last crystal that we put in. And I'm continuing around, just adding in the crystals. So 3 got added in there. You can see that nice kind of lacing effect that's going on. I'm going to continue adding in the crystals around the back here, and then do a couple more rows of my seed beads. So showing the case in progress, you can slip it off as you're working with it and just keep working with the tube. I like to keep it on as I'm working with it. It helps me to get a nice tighter knit around the piece. Again, if you want to switch up the sizes, you want to go with delicas, it may switch the number, but I wanted to show that I'm also getting to the point where I need to add some thread onto my project. So to add some thread onto the project, I'm going to take the needle off, tie off some extra thread right here before that crystal, and that way it'll hide in a little bit better as I'm working with it. You can also, if you want to, sew back in with a new piece of thread, start further along and add there. I actually have a Better Beater episode on adding thread and kind of sewing back in versus tying off, so check that out if you need help. But I'm going to continue going on with that 2-drop peyote, creating and adding my crystals in place. As you continue to build and do your step-ups, I just wanted to reiterate basically how you know when you're adding the crystals. They're doing in bands of 2, and you don't have to add the crystals. You can do the whole thing with seed beads. There's tons of patterns out there too that you can do. I thought this was a nice, kind of faster and blingy way to do my needle case. So I have my last 2 beads that I'm putting on in this row, and I'll show you then how I know that I'm ready to put those crystals on, just to reiterate, because if you get a little bit further, you can see the design a little bit better. You can see that I now have 3 groupings of 2 between each one of my crystals. Once you get to that 3rd grouping of 2, you realize that the next time around is going to need crystals to go on. However, as I step up, you're going to realize that you still have one more time to go around adding in the seed beads. So every time you have 3 rows of those 2-drop seed beads, you know that the next time you're going into that row, you're going to be putting on the crystal. As you go around then and add in to the next row here, so this time here I'm doing my seed beads, you can see that that goes from 1 seed bead grouping over top to 2. So that way I know I have 2 on there already, and as I continue around and come around to the start, once I'm done this row, I know that I have 3 rows of the 2-drop in one of the sections, and that's what I'm going to get ready then to add the crystals, because I have 3 rows there. So the next time around in that peyote, I'm going to be adding that 1 crystal in its place. So here I am ready to go, and I know that again when I start counting after finishing this row, I'm ready to do my step up into the first 2 beads that I did on this previous row that I showed that we were going around. And now again, I'm ready, and I know that it's time for crystals, because if I count 1, 2, 3 rows, I have 3 rows. So I'm going to go in and put in my little crystals and through. and continue on to that peyote. Again, we're going to continue this the whole way around, up the whole cover, adding in the crystals every 3 rows. Once you have those 3 rows, you add in the crystals and go around. The next time I go around, you're not going to add another row of crystals in because you only have 1, 2 here after the previous one when you go around the second time. So I know I need to do a whole nother round of seed beads before I go in and add another row of crystals after this one. So I have my case pushed up to the very top of the piece, and I'm getting ready to kind of finish off the bottom. You just need to use your judgment, especially if your needle case is a different size. You may need to start out again with a different amount of rows. And as I have my blingy case here, I'm going to come to the bottom, and I'm going to add 1 more row of crystals. You want your top almost pushed up to the top so we can make kind of a seamless end there. I'm going to do 1 more row of crystals, and then we're going to proceed to just do some seed beads as we close off the bottom. You can choose to basically stop at this point if you want to, and that way your case will sit up. I am going to cinch in and cover the bottom, but you don't have to, that's up to you. So I'm going to go 1 more row around with my crystals, and then we'll start downgrading that peyote stitch to get the back nice and flat. So I'm to the base of the actual project here. You can see these last 2 rows of my peyote that are going around a crystal, I'm using to kind of cover up and start to get the bottom covered. So I'm going around adding in my 2 seed beads, and that's pulling in that case towards the bottom. Now, as you do this, you are getting this case tighter onto the needle cover case. And as you're going around the needle cover, like I said, some people may choose that they want to glue this into place. You do not have to. But as you create this bottom, if you do want to continue and create the bottom, again, you can basically stop here because you don't see the bottom, but I'm going to cover up the bottom just to kind of make it that nice slipped in casing. And you are pulling tightly, again, on the thread rather than where the needle is, going around. And we're going to force those kind of seed beads towards the back, which is going to start to cover up the back. So I'm going to go along the bottom here and go ahead in and add my 2 beads. So after stepping up, the first thing that we're going to do to downgrade our peyote is we're going to put in 1 11-0 seed bead instead of 2 for that 2-drop peyote. So we're going to put in 1 11 as we go around, adding in our next section here. And you're going to see that that really closes it up and pulls those 2-drop pieces in towards that back. So downgrading from that 1 or from the 2 to the 1 will pull this case cover in really tightly towards that bottom and get it almost so that it's encapsulated on it. Go around adding in 1 seed bead in between those 2 seed beads that sit right on top of your last crystal and pull in towards the center to get it nice and tight on the piece. Move some of my crystals over here. If you want to, you can make a little base almost for it by sewing on some of the crystals. 4 of them, you can make a little almost leg stand and add those in too. Oh, so in the habit of adding 2, I just added 2 there. Add 1, sew through 2. Add 1, sew through 2. So I'm going to go in here, add in all these extra little seed beads. And then as you come back around, it gets that bottom cover in. So there I'm coming out back through that start of those starter 2, and then also through that 1 seed bead that we just added as we run around. So sewing through basically 3 seed beads. Give it a nice tight yank, and you can see that covers up the bottom. Now what I would suggest is, if you want to, you can keep sewing. You can push this out of the casing here. And what I would suggest, this is a little cheap, go ahead, you can slide the whole casing off if you want. It is a tight kind of fill. Go ahead in with an actual black magic marker and just cover with a black Sharpie marker that bottom base. You don't need to go any further then. And it basically acts like a stop to stop the needle case from falling off. To reinforce that, I'm going to sew back through the project and weave my peyote thread back in towards the casing, so that way I don't have any extra along the look of it. So after kind of coloring the black bottom there, you can see that nice kind of polished look that it gives. And I do recommend closing off that bottom a little bit rather than just doing straight down. Here at the top, I put a needle back on, and what we are going to do is the same thing around the top that we did around the bottom, adding in 1 seed bead in place of our 2. Again, that's just going to kind of cinch there around the top of the piece, and adding in 1 seed bead then sewing over and getting that nice tight pull. It'll make a little bit of kind of a pointed end on this peyote too. You can see that nice look that it gives. We are going to make a little cover for the lid. If you don't want to make the cover for the lid, which I will say the lid portion you do want to probably glue on. If you don't want to make the cover for the lid, go ahead and grab that Sharpie marker again and just color the whole thing when you are about to do that. I'm also going to do a little twist and put in a cabochon right along the top that is going to let me know exactly what needle size is inside. So if you want to make a different colored case for each size needle, if you have 10s, 12s, 13s, 11s, you can make multitudes of different cases to have with your pieces, and easily identifiable. Write that number or put that number on the top like I'm going to do with that cabochon. So going around here, finishing up, I have one more seed bead to go in, and then really to reinforce the end and to tighten it up, I'm going to go sew through that end one more time. Very high-tech tip here. I'm telling you, pull the cover down a little bit before we get to the top, and I'm going to paint so that way if anything is exposed, it's that nice black color. The wood is unfinished natural wood, so it'll hold that color in, and I'm just literally taking a black Sharpie and coloring that area. So that way when I pull the cover up, any black that you see, even if you want to take the needle case cover off, is going to be, or any wood that you would see rather, is going to be that black color. So I'm literally just using a Sharpie marker to color in and finish that off. Because again, it gives it a nice kind of polished look, almost velvety as you're working with it. And if you want to, you can color that whole way. It does have a nice friction on it, so we want to make sure that we're not doing anything as far as painting or anything that is going to stop that friction from happening. So the Sharpie marker works really well and covers that up. And now we go to the cap. So you can see it has that nice ending to it, goes with black. If you're using a different color, you can certainly use a different color Sharpie, or you can keep it that nice natural wood if you want. And that pops on the top. And we're going to go ahead and make our top cover. If you want to, again, you can just go ahead and take the Sharpie marker and blacken the Sharpie marker, and your lid is finished. So the needle case actually has a pretty tight grip to it when it comes to taking the lid off. So I've gone back and forth, and I've actually decided not to do the top cover. You can if you want and glue it on, but I think I'm going to be putting so much pressure on the seed beads there that it's not really going to make sense. If you do want to, you're going to do about 4 rows of seed beads, and you can just glue it right along the end. I also have a clear glass cab here in a 14mm that sits pretty much exactly on the top of my needle case. And I had Bridget actually print out a size 10, and we just used some super glue and super glued it on there basically, and then did some permalac along the back. And I'm just going to take the glue here and glue it right to the top of my needle case. Then everywhere else in my needle case that's still exposed, I'm going to paint it with my Sharpie marker, and that way it'll get that nice kind of black look into it. I'm just going to let this dry a little bit, kind of put it off to the side, do my black around the edges after it dries, and my needle case is completely done and finished. Thanks so much for watching me make my fun new needle case cover. And I had a lot of fun doing this. I liked the idea of keeping it simple at the top. It kind of went back and forth. And the fun cabs of being able to write that size needle and glue that right along the top. It makes for a really elegant thing if you're going to a class. It's a really cool little thing to bling out that not everybody decorates their needle cases, but if you want to, here's an actual example and a fun way to do it. Thanks so much for watching. And again, if you need any materials to decorate your own needle case, you can go below the video. There's little links to the different products if you want to get them from us online at PotomacBeads.com, as well as PotomacBeads.eu. You can also subscribe to this YouTube channel. It'll give you regular updates when we have new products like glass cabs, new ideas, new tutorials, and things that we think will help you become a better beader. As always, thanks so much for watching, and enjoy making multitudes of your own needle case covers.